Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
All right, welcome back to Breaking into Breaking Bad with Clifford Humphrey and Caleb Humphrey. This is season 1, episode 6, Crazy Handful of Nothing. So, Cabes, what do you think that title refers to?
I honestly don't have the slightest idea. Crazy handful of nothing.
I think it's the line that Marie says when they're playing poker, when she shows Hank.
Oh, yep.
But I think there's more to it than just that. I think the poker game is a kind of a theme that goes through this episode. Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. So it starts with not a flashback, but a flash forward.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. The whole conversation that he's having with Jesse about, no matter what happens, no more bloodshed, as he's walking out with
Oh,
this bag of you have know what it is, and shaved head and the music. Oh, it was beautiful.
yeah, no, the irony of him saying no more violence and while he's like walking back from it's just like a mayhem war zone.
Yeah, you have no idea what just happened. I loved it.
Yeah. And then it goes to his chemistry class, which I was kind of surprised he was still teaching.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of talked about how he's they going to step away, and that they found a substitute, um because
Mhm.
the chemo is obviously starting to take effect,
Right.
which we saw kind of play out in this episode.
Yeah. So my guess is that there's something symbolic in the chemistry lesson that he was giving right there.
Absolutely.
If our assumption is that nothing in this is by accident, but that the writer and the producer intended every little thing, down to
hmm
Marie's wearing purple again, as you've noted,
There you go.
whatever that means. But yeah, so there they are in the chemistry class, and he's talking about elements and energy and explosions. So we're getting what's that called, foreshadowing happening.
There you go. Yep.
But I wonder, is there something else going on too, right? When he's because what does he say there? I tried to follow it because I assumed that it had something to do with what was going to be happening. But he says,
Right. So he's talking about the two different kinds of change, right? You got the rapid change, and then you got I think it was like decay over time, and he was talking about the different chemicals that go into that. And obviously, he showed on later when he said, the whole famous "this is not meth," and I forget what the actual uh, chemical
Mercury.
imbalance was. That
Right.
yeah, but the several times I've watched it, you also kind of think, oh, well, like, is this also Walt changing? Like, obviously it's kind of like a decay over time.
Well,
Um,
so do you think it was a decay or do you think it was an explosion?
well,
Because
that one was,
the
yeah, that one was
faster
obviously,
he says this line that says something like the faster the elements undergo change, the more violent the explosion. There are some changes happening. Let's just say inside Walt, I think.
right, right. And then just the kind of icing on the cake with the mercury.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then it shifts to this support group thing that he's in, and we didn't get any sort of pre explanation for that, but I imagine it was Skylar's idea, probably.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't think
And
it
they,
was
they
Walt's
just
idea.
literally just put him on the spot,
Yeah,
you
in
know?
front of everybody. Yeah. Now, but I
Mhm.
had a couple thoughts. One was, like, he's a smart guy. Like, how has he not come up with an alibi for why he's coming home late in the afternoon? They know he's not working at the car wash anymore. Why does he set himself up for that? Why isn't he told Skylar what he's doing? I mean,
Yeah.
the,
Well, we got to think, like, he's still, other than being awake, he's still very amateur,
Mhm.
other than his knowledge of chemistry. but everything else, like he's never really lied before. He's never really gone down this path of having to come up with different scenarios, right? Um, and so I think it was pretty telling that you're seeing him gradually get better at lying.
Hmm.
Like when they brought up like, well, what is it that you do? Maybe if we knew what you do, I like to take walks. And he was trying to just think of different things that he has encountered recently, but
Right.
he's getting better at it. Like there's the saying, anything you practice at, you'll get good at,
Right.
and
Right.
he's getting better at it.
Yeah, and it's again to his credit as an actor, right? That he's acting like he's acting, and he's doing a great
Right.
job at
Hmm.
being both believable and also we know that he's not telling the truth. His character is not telling the truth. Yeah, and then I thought it was another ironic juxtaposition when he says, "Yeah, I like to be out in nature, the cacti," and then it shifts to cooking, meth in the desert, which is something that's not natural to the desert at all. It's completely artificial, but
Yeah.
the position was pretty interesting. But I thought that the his mere presence at the support group thing was, I'm assuming, yeah, Skylar's idea. Secondly, why did he go? Well, he probably didn't want to be a jerk and he thought this would be a great help to her. But I'm also thinking he probably didn't want to go. Why couldn't he tell Skylar, hey, look, it's hard enough for me to go through all this treatment. Let me just handle it my own way or something. Maybe he wanted to go. I find that hard to believe, but maybe he wanted to go. But the whole experience was reminiscent of sort of old Walt, I thought.
It was more he just did because he was told to do type of scenario,
Mhm.
like there they didn't show a lot before that. They just kind of open up the scene. They're there, and
Right.
so yeah, it was kind of pre Heisenberg.
Pre Heisenberg. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesse finds out that he's got cancer and
Hmm.
it all makes click. It clicks. It makes sense to Jesse now why Walt's doing this. Right.
Hmm.
And what was interesting, I thought too, is that Walt admits, yes, it is just for the money. Right. That's his initial reason. And he admits that. He says, well, what about it or something.
Yeah.
Something that didn't make sense to me when he's having a hard time when he falls out of the RV and he's gasping for air and all that. Why does he tell Jesse to go back in there and cook? He's already
Yeah, that was.
already said that's my domain, right? You don't have anything, and he has no respect for Jesse as a chemistry person, right? Like you don't know what you're doing, and he's got his own pride involved. Like this is my thing, and it's going to be good, and it's going to be high
Hmm.
quality. He has zero reason to trust Jesse with the chemistry.
Well, and on top of that, when they walk into the RV, he sees like the Playboy magazine, he sees the broken vases everywhere, and so that's when he was just like, I can't trust you at all. And so for him to kind of go back into there, I think it has to do a lot with their conversation that he has with Jesse. Like he recognizes right away that Jesse knows a lot about cancer because of his
Yeah,
experience with his aunt,
right.
right? He goes, oh, A3, that means it's in the lymph nodes or, whatever the term was. Um, his next question, his follow-up question to Jesse was, well, how long did she last? And he goes, oh, I don't know, 7 months. And so there's this kind of sense of urgency that I think Walt has kind of put himself in now. He goes, well, 7 months, how long do I really have to actually be doing this
Yeah,
before I'm bedridden, And so like I think he's just like, you know what to do, I'll be here. So maybe it was a little bit of uh you know a leap of faith for him to do that, but like he's also dealing with we got to make this meth. Like we got to do it. I'm here. He kind of went back into his old Jesse the student, I'm the teacher type of role. But
Yeah.
I, I,
Well,
I think that's
that's a good point. I think
kind of
that makes sense. My next question was, why is he so unbelievably angry with Jesse after he's selling crystal all night, one person at a time? Like we know that he gets angry, but he's never expressed it so much before, right? Like, remember in that scene when they're getting when he and Skylar are in the hospital and they're getting the first images of their baby.
right.
He's angry, right? When she finds out about Jesse Pinkman, and he's like, I would really appreciate it. It'd be really nice. Like, he's controlling all of his anger, right? He's keeping it all in.
Yep.
Still feeling it, right? But he's just like, it's all under control here. But when they're out there in the desert, and when Jesse comes back with what, $26,000, which
No, 2,600.
600.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a whole lot for what he knows what he can get. But his anger towards Jesse it shows how naive, right? He doesn't know how hard
Exactly. Exactly. He has no idea what the work that goes into it just to get a return. And and maybe it was because like of the first episode when he sees the drug bust, and it was like $500,000 drug bust, and so he was just kind of like, oh man, like, why are we just this is not worth the risk that I'm putting in to get $1,300, so
Yeah, that's it. And that's why, flashing forward to the poker game, everything is sort of a calculated risk, right? Like when you're playing Texas Hold'em. But my point is, he's changing a little bit. He's learning to express his anger more openly, without reserve. But it also shows how naive he is about the industry, I guess, but especially the risks you have to assume when you're going to be selling meth, right? So it shows how ridiculous his claim at the beginning is: no violence, no bloodshed. It's like,
yeah,
you don't get that. If you're in this world, you have to assume that that's part of the game.
right. Yeah, I'm the silent partner, and you just do what you got to do, and it should be easy. Yeah, he doesn't have any idea. He has no clue.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So Hank finds out that the mask was from the high school,
Right.
and brings it up to Walt. I was kind of surprised, kind of impressed actually, with how Walt kind of kept it together. You think he would be really on edge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he doesn't know what Hank knows, right? But because he's feeling guilty, and he's feeling, he knows that it was him, right? You'd think that he would assume, oh, he must know, and that he would kind of come off really awkward. But he doesn't. He's sort of like, yeah, I don't know. Sure, look at our inventory. Like, he shouldn't really look at the inventory. He knows that the stuff's not there, right? So, but I guess he
I thought that was pretty crazy, because he didn't really have much of a response at all. Like, hey, I want to talk to you just about work related things, and he didn't freak out or anything. He was just like, oh, okay, go on.
Well,
So
I think then he had that shows how absolutely out of the blue this was to him, right? Like, he didn't expect that. But when he pulls it out, that should have made him visibly kind of, what's the word, betray a kind of guilt, I think. But he doesn't. He holds it all together. But then he like lets him in. He could have said, oh, I can't find the key to the inventory,
right. Yeah.
He doesn't do that.
The only time you really see him show a responsive like emotion is when Hank says, "Oh, somebody croaked our snitch," and
Right.
so he finds out that Crazy 8 was actually a confidential informant for the DEA.
Well, I had a question. How do we know that it was Crazy 8?
Because he said we found his car, and that was Crazy 8's car. He said we found we found his car out in the desert, and somebody croaked our snitch, and so it was Crazy. I mean, I guess you could say it was Emilio, but
Well, that was the question I had. Who was the snitch? Obviously, Walt's trying to figure it out in his head.
right.
How does that work? Maybe I'm just naive here too. Like, how does Crazy 8 operate as a known dealer in meth while also being a snitch? Is that part of the deal they accept? They're like, well, we'll let this guy get away with so long
So
as
I'll say this. That is something that you may or may not learn in a different show.
okay, fair enough. But let
Yeah.
me add one element more of why this is confusing. And again, maybe
Okay.
we'll find out later on. Why would so we know that they bust Emilio, right?
Right.
At the beginning. Why would Crazy
Hmm.
Eight have informed on his cousin? Right?
Well, we don't know that.
Right. But I'm just saying if the hypothesis is that it's Crazy Eight that's the snitch,
Hmm.
that doesn't make sense that he would have snitched on Emilio. Maybe they had some feud we don't know about that Crazy Eight was, but then he bails him out. Like, I don't know. That still doesn't make any sense to me. So right now, I, as the viewer, am with Walt confused as to who the snitch is and all that. Now, maybe that'll become more clear later on, or like you said, if I watch another show that is adjacent to this one, it will become clear. But
Hmm.
so Skinny Pete,
Oh yeah, good old Skinny Pete.
yeah, yeah, that guy's kind of a loser. His friendship with Jesse, right? The last time we saw him, he was in his house and hanging out only because he thought he could get some free drugs from him
Right.
and was going to leave with the other guy when they were like, oh, he's not sharing his meth. We're out of here. It seems like the only friendship they have is one based on mutual help, right? It's a friendship of utility. We'll get
Yeah.
later on. I mean, except that he's sitting there with him in the hospital, right?
Right. Like he had good intentions. He wanted to help Jesse. He thought he would be in an important role in this introduction to Tuco. And and when that obviously fell through, like he had a weird way of saying he was sorry, kind of playing it out in front of Walt.
Oh, he's
Um
yeah. I can't believe he did that. Right? Yeah, but
yeah,
he probably felt like, oh man, I'm somebody special because I know the big deal.
right. Yeah, I'm somebody.
Yeah,
And when you see in that episode or in that scene, you see Walt just to me it looked like he was like, man, this is my responsibility. I created
mm,
this, like I told Jesse to do this. He did it, and now he's laying in the hospital. And
yeah,
so I think when he tells, asks Skinny Pete, tell me everything, like it was the that look on his face. He just he felt sorry. It looked to me like he felt sorry for Jesse, and it was like this was my fault. I had to fix it.
yeah, yeah. I got to say, I'd rather hang out with Badger than Skinny Pete. Okay, so let's see. Something we were just talking about was oh no, I'm sorry. I wanted to back up. So you were saying that Walt was confronted with the fact that his actions have now cost someone else significant pain,
Correct.
Jesse. But that's not the only person in this episode who has to suffer because of Walt. Hugo.
Oh, poor Hugo.
Yeah. I mean, they go out of their way
Mm.
to show us how kind Hugo is
Yep.
to Walt, right? Giving him his gum and helping him out and showing sympathy. So they set it up. They set it up in such a way for us to feel very sympathetic to Hugo.
Yep.
And then you bring in Hank, and Hank's desperate to solve the mystery, solve the crime here, and I was trying.
I don't think Hank has any sympathy. He even admits later on that like no, this was not our guy, but he was a bad guy. He had a bunch of weed in his
Well,
house. Like he just
right,
hates bad guys,
yeah. Well, once they made the arrest, he wanted to justify it, so
Right.
he has to. What does he say? Tear apart his house in order to find, you know, some quantity of weed, but it's
Right.
still weed. It's much less of a deal than meth.
Mm-hmm.
But it's another person, right, who's now lost his job and is going to have a hard time probably getting a new one.
Oh, I think they said he was going to get deported. So
Yeah, yeah. So that's starting to play on Walt's conscience that
right.
he's just kept wanting to say, well, no more violence. Well, here's violence happening to these other people
Mm-hmm.
because of his actions. So I think he's learning, I'm not going to be able to get out of this without these consequences happening. So the poker game scene.
Yeah, man. Started off just a friendly game, but I
Right.
think it started to it got a little crazy when Hank kind of insults Walt's criminal intelligence per
Oh man.
se.
Wow. Yeah. What happens there? So Hank says, no offense, but I don't think you'd know a criminal if he was close enough to do a hernia check on you. Right.
Right. Yeah. Because he
So,
had said, "Listen, Hugo seemed like an innocent guy enough. I don't think he would do anything like that." And then that was his response. And Walt's look was just,
oh, that look, that could
you
kill.
have no idea who you're talking to, you know. But he can't say anything, so he just gives him this angry look. And
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So Capes, you played your fair share of Texas Hold'em.
yeah, hand or two.
You're being modest. You've played it quite a bit, and you've been able to
Yep.
put some money at it. I'm wondering your take on that one hand that we see where Hank is really trying to read Walt, and Walt is not, I think, previous Walt, the guy that Hank has known for so many years, is not the kind of guy who would make such a big bluff.
Right.
And so I mean, I don't know. How did you read that?
Well, at that point, he just looked at the board and was like, "Is there any hand that could beat me? Oh, it's this one. Oh man, it has to be that. Walt has to be. I'm not gonna let him beat me. I'll show him. I'm gonna fold this hand. And kind of try to make it look like he won the hand by folding, which a lot of people do. Once Marie flipped over the cards and
Well, can we just
you
ask?
know,
Can we just say how much of a jerk move is that? You
oh
know,
yeah, no, you would get kicked out of it.
yeah, you don't.
Family game, so I get it. Yeah, I'm sure Walt loved that, and then, once Hank gave him that stare, and he just kind of right back at him, it was a perfect way for Walt to kind of respond
And
to
that's
that
that's when Marie
statement.
says handful of nothing.
Right.
He's got
That's what
nothing.
it was.
He looks like he's
Yep.
got something, but he really doesn't. Yeah, but the look in Walt's eyes that whole time, it was clearly there was more. Here's the point. There's more on the line than just the game. There was pride on the line,
Right. Yep.
and I love how Hank starts flexing his chest muscles. You know, it reminds me of like a gorilla, like trying to like show dominance, But anyway, so that whole scene of sort of betting and going in with nothing, looking like asking for the whole, I'm going all in. I think that plays out ultimately when Walt goes to see Tuco.
Yeah.
When he goes up there and Tuco's like, I can't believe you came in here and you brought in all this meth, like, and you're asking me for all this stuff, but you've got nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the point where this sort of flips on its head. All of a sudden, Walt doesn't have a handful of nothing. He got a handful of something. And it's not what anyone expected. Right. So it's
Yeah. I also think that,
got
and
a
I
better.
don't know. Do you think the haircut gave him any kind of confidence?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Is there anything symbolic in him shaving his head? I mean, he knows.
Yeah, I mean, you see the hair falling out in the shower. Jesse had made a comment earlier when they were cooking, saying like, "Hey, put some an ice pack on your head. It helps with the hair falling out." So I think it was more of like a, fighting fire with fire type of thing. Just went ahead and want to kind of own it in a sense. Um,
Oh yeah, no,
but
no, for sure. Yeah, I know. I think that's right. And he does. He looks a little bit more intimidating, right? And Walter Jr. says, "Badass dad," or something like that,
yep.
right? So
Hmm.
really, I think what you see with the haircut is the transformation from Walt to Heisenberg.
Right. So the Heisenberg thing. Do you know where he got that from?
I do not. Tell me, where does that come
So
from?
I mean, they don't show at all him thinking, "Oh man, this would be a great alias to go by." But Heisenberg was a German chemist during World War II. I think there's a picture of him with Einstein. and a bunch of other ones. And so, that's kind of where he got it from. But they don't really show a lot of thought into that. He just says it. It's like he had it planned all along. Because like right when Tuco asks, like, "Who are you?" He goes, "I'm Heisenberg." He just says it, but it's catchy.
Right, right. So the question I have is, where does Walt find the courage to go and face Tuco like that? Because that seemed to come out of nowhere.
I think it was a little bit of everything. Well, first you see that he's having to give a check for $1,900 every week that he has to tell them to cash on Monday. He knows that Jesse's aunt only lasted 7 months. He knows that he's only getting a little bit of $1,300 for his cut. Like everything is kind of compounding quickly on him, and his time is running out. And so it's like, not only does he have to take responsibility for the pain that he's caused all these other people like Hugo and Jesse, but he doesn't have a lot of time left. And like if I'm putting myself in his position, it's like, what do I got to lose at this point in my life? And so I think that kind of gives him the boost. And I mean, think about it, what he's already done up to this point in the first 5 episodes. He's already had to kill somebody. He's already had to wipe somebody up off of the floor. Like he's had to do a lot of things that he's never done before. So he might still be riding this high of getting away with certain things, being great at the chemistry, and like I said, all the other factors.
Yeah. And like we said at the beginning, in his chemistry lesson, things are speeding up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe one of the points you made, he knows that he's got to speed up because other people are starting to get hurt. And I think he in a way, he might be thinking, I'm going to minimize that if I just go all in, right, as it were, with like the poker game. And
right.
He definitely could have just been killed. Right. The explosion could have disabled him in such a way that maybe he wouldn't have walked out of there alive.
When he gets back in the car too, and he just does that just huge,
what was that?
That release of emotion. Like, he was putting on this mask all throughout the whole time with Tuco. And when he got out there, it was just like this manly, like he had to, it was the release of whatever was left in his body at that point, and I thought that was just, that was intense.
Right. It was when we could see that the Heisenberg mask was just a cover. It was just a face. And he's holding it together, right? He's pretending, he's managing here,
Yeah.
But the other thing I saw in that rush that he gets when he's back in the car was pure pleasure.
Mm-hmm. It was his first win.
Was it his first win? Yeah, I guess so.
Like legitimate win that he did. Like he thought of this himself. He went and did this. So it was just like a
right. And he didn't just stay in the kitchen doing the cooking. He went out on the street and did the thing that Jesse was supposed to be the one that had expertise in.
Yep.
And that was a major thing. But the thing I thought was important about that, the fact that he got pleasure out of that, is that it's the first sign that we see of him having a reason to do this that has nothing to do with the money.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's true. None of the things he's had to do thus far, he has taken pleasure in. He's done them because he had to, because of things that happened, right? Whether it was caused by him or just came on to him. But this was the first one that he really did enjoy immensely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think your line about him having a mask. Do you remember that old movie with Jim Carrey?
Oh yeah.
Mask.
Mm-hmm.
If I recall, I mean, it's a comedy, but there was something about when you put the mask on, it kind of gets harder to take off, right? It starts to you start to become the mask, right? Like it kind of takes over.
Right.
And going back to what you said before about something you practice at, you will get better at, right? This is like the Aristotelian understanding of character. We build our character by every choice that we make. And that word character it's related to the way when you would imprint an image on a coin. So our character is the imprinting of all of our choices into the image that we become. And so in a way, the more that he steps into this other role that's not really him, the more he's becoming that person.
Right.
And this is the first time he sort of took an extensive time in that persona.
Yeah, like you see less and less of Walt and more of Heisenberg.
We'll have to see what happens in the next episode, but it seems to be that that's potentially where this is going.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place
So
to
we
stop.
we got the finale.
That's right. Okay, so next episode is the last episode
Yep.
in the season. Yeah, right. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it.